Welcome to the Veterans Who Build show. Today's guest, we have a Marine Corps infantry officer, someone who has several degrees in human capital management, as well as an unbelievable dissertation on how to best leverage military veterans in the professional AEC industry. Today, he is the Chief Talent Officer of MCFA, and an amazing person who is incredibly passionate about how to leverage human capital, right, especially for veterans, is doing really great things in the space, and I'm really excited for y'all to hear his story and hear what he has to say. A quick shout out to our subscribers, to our listeners, a reminder to please subscribe to our channels. Quick shout out to our sponsor, Jet.Build. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Jesse Gemberling-Johnson. Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build. Welcome everyone to the Veterans Who Build show. Today we got a great episode coming your way. Jesse is here to tell us his story, his lessons learned, advice. Jesse, thanks so much for joining us today, man.
Adam, thank you so much for having me, brother.
Absolutely. Before we kick off, before I introduce you, and then we run through your story, where are you calling in from today?
The great city of Philadelphia. God's country over here.
I love to hear it, man. Love to hear it. All right, everyone. So introducing Jesse. Jesse serves as the Director of Talent, Recruitment, and Development with MCFA. He has over 15 years of experience in project leadership, human capital strategy, and optimizing team performance. He has held leadership positions across the commercial real estate, construction management, and management consulting industries. Prior to the private sector, Jesse served as an infantry officer in the United States Marine Corps with 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines, where he deployed to Southeast Asia, Afghanistan, and Australia. Jesse holds a bachelor's degree in management from Gettysburg College, a graduate certificate in organizational behavior from Harvard Extension School, a master's degree in organizational dynamics from the University of Pennsylvania, and is pursuing a master's degree in human capital management from Columbia University. Jesse also runs a special needs fishing nonprofit called Fish for Life, whose mission is bringing dignity, inclusion, and new possibilities to special needs children. Jesse currently lives in Northwest Philly with his wife, 2-year-old son, and dog. Jesse, that's an awesome mission. I'm going to drop those links in the show notes when we're done. Get some exposure for that. We'll get into that. We'll get into all of these degrees as well. But to kick off, let's please start with childhood, right? Where'd you grow up? What was childhood like? And what led you to enlisting, to serving?
Yeah, man. So grew up in Philly, grew up in a neighborhood in Philly called Germantown. I grew up in a friend's school, a Quaker school system. Which is an interesting, twist because, pacifism is kind of a core tenet of Quaker beliefs. And actually grew up in a Mennonite church, not very, not super strict, but nonetheless, pacifism deeply kind of incorporated. So I was the oldest of 3 boys. I have 2 younger brothers, each 2 years younger than I am. My mother was a music teacher for 30 years at the school I grew up in and attended, Germantown Friends School in Philly. And my father ran his own recycling. It was a plastics distribution company. So grew up, for all intents and purposes, pretty happy childhood. A lot of sports, right? I played soccer in college, in undergrad. My middle brother played baseball in college, and my youngest brother played soccer as well in college. So Lots of sports. I remember growing up just like on the go constantly, from soccer in the fall to either basketball or later squash in the winter to tennis in the spring. It was baseball. It was, every weekend was sort of a logistics juggling act.
Mm.
For my parents, very grateful that I had the opportunity. I think a very interesting, and this will tie back later on in life, but I grew up playing a balance of both team sports and individual sports.
Hmm.
And I think there's a mindset to understand, and how that place like ties into how you operate later in life, and sort of a
Hmm.
optimal method of how you fit into a larger system. Or kind of how you drive internal motivation for different things, or for dealing with adversity. So yeah, grew up I went to Gettysburg College in South Central PA. Had a great college time. Wasn't super focused on academics, but was very socially integrated. Played some soccer, loved it. Developed some good friendships. And then, so I got out of college, and I actually, my first job in '08 was in finance, which is really interesting because, one, I'm terrible at math and I have zero interest in finance. But at that point, right, I was 22. I really had no idea what I wanted to pursue, like many 22-year-olds. So I just kind of jumped at kind of the first opportunity I got. It was pretty miserable, like very mechanical, super monotonous,
Hmm.
not stimulating, and like it just wasn't. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew that it wasn't right. And so I think from that moment, I was kind of like, just going through life and enjoying, being in my early 20s in Philly, but like wanting something more. And, I remember there's actually a catalyst to me choosing to join the Marine Corps. And like everybody, right? Like everybody who serves has their own, decision, their own
Hmm.
catalyst, impetus for serving. And I've caught myself because sometimes I would say this and be like, oh, it was kind of a selfish choice to serve, but like at the end of the day, it's still a choice to become a servant leader, an opportunity to serve others. So whether it's like I've kind of gotten over that, like
Hmm.
qualifying statement. The truth is, man, like it was a Sunday night. I was in the fall of '08. I don't know if you remember the market, the economy had just market had just bottomed out. And I was at Merrill Lynch at the time. They were getting picked up, bought out by Bank of America, and this weird merger kind of beginning to take place. The Phillies won the World Series that year, but the Eagles was in the fall, right? So there was football on Sunday. The Phillies were in the postseason. I'm a big Philadelphia sports fan. All of my buddies had come back to Philly after college, so our weekends were just like a lot of partying, a lot of like hanging out together. And like by Sunday night, you're a little kind of torn up by the end of the week. But we would always kind of wind down the weekend with like the final beers of the weekend, watching the show called Generation Kill. And there was an HBO show that was about first recon, I think, in the initial invasion of Fallujah
Hmm.
in Iraq. And I remember watching that show and like, probably a few beers deep from the long days we had, but I remember being so emotionally connected to the
Hmm.
camaraderie that I was watching. Yes, it was a TV show, but it was real, and I have felt like the brotherhood in sports teams in the past.
Yeah.
And I know what it's like to work hard and do hard shit for one another with the
Hmm.
intent of trying to accomplish some sort of mission and objective. And
Yeah.
so, I remember, that night, like, looking at my buddies and be like, I'm going to join the Marines. And like, I think they kind of laughed it off. And I woke up probably a little pirate eyed in the morning and was like,
Hmm.
I'm still doing this. So, at some point I left that job probably that week. I don't remember the exact timeline, but and fast forward 4 months later, I was in the Marine Corps. So
Hmm.
I then I immediately started training because up until that Monday morning, I had no idea that I was going to join the Marines. And then, as I do, and this will play into things too, like I'm a pretty extreme person, and when I kind of do put my mind to something, like there's not a lot that's going to stop me from accomplishing it. So, had to learn about, what the physical fitness, requirements were, weren't super challenging for entrance, just coming off of playing 4 years of college soccer, like was kind of fit enough to kind of get in. Pull-ups weren't my forte. I'm a pretty skinny guy, but I think one of the big drivers, man, for me joining the Marines was like growing up in Philly. It's kind of a chippy blue collar, city, a little bit overshadowed maybe by Boston in sports and New York in volume and magnitude. And DC's got its own sort of elitist mentality. And Philly's just like kind of known for being a little grittier. And maybe I really own that identity of the city. And I kind of just wanted to test myself. Right. And like, I think I'm kind of tough, and like, not in like a tough guy sense, but in like I can endure some hard shit, and like I can like, this is fun. Like I can go through hard stuff. Like, like put me next to some offensive lineman from the Midwest, and like let me wrestle this meathead, and like he'll probably kick my ass, but like I'm gonna scratch and claw my way to like make him hurt at least. Like, so I think there was an element of that, right, where I kind of wanted to test myself and kind of see if I could handle this, Marines, which is this quintessential kind of organization that's the few, the proud. Like it's an awesome disclaimer. It's like you if you get to earn that title, you've earned something. So I joined, got through officer candidate school. Funny story was like I'm not from a military family. It's really interesting and how this all ties in, because like my dad actually like was at Berkeley in like the heat of the anti Vietnam movement, which is like an interesting kind of dynamic when I decided to join the Marines. Like growing up in a Quaker school, having parents that and zero knock on, had a wonderful childhood, but you grow up and you're used to a lot of the things that you learn growing up, right? There's this nurture that you get taught things or exposed as part of just the environment in which you grow up, and that becomes something that I think a lot of us, until we get a little older, don't challenge, right? Because this is how we were raised, and good, bad, or indifferent. Those are a lot of the associations that you have, I think, growing up. So so join the Marine Corps. It was a pretty eye-opening experience for me, but I thought I pride myself in the ability to adapt in kind of whatever situation. Got through that, went through the basic school. I got assigned the MOS of infantry, which is what I was hoping for. And then I went through infantry officer course, which is a pretty intense course as far as kind of the ground forces of the Marine Corps. Probably the hardest physical endeavor I've gone through, but nonetheless, right? Like there's something to be said where like when you're going through something with other people that you don't want to let down, there is an undoubted extra degree of kind of drive that you have. And I think some people can ratchet it, can really pull from that even deeper. And I think that'll tie into, I know what we're going to get at with veterans in the civilian workforce kind of afterward, and understanding more intrinsic motivators. Marine Corps took me out to.
You have some awesome pointers I want to call out. One is it's really interesting to, focus on as simple as a transition as one could have from civilian to military, which is experiencing sports, right? Both team and individual. So it's really nice to see that, and kind of what you just highlighted in terms of you don't want to let those around you down. So that's a really nice kind of segue from, being a kid going into military. Second thing I want to highlight, and we'll touch on that later, is those qualifying statements. And you were absolutely right to call that out, to say you don't need those qualifying statements for your service, right? And what you did, you should and can feel proud about it, right? And then the last piece I want to call out especially is you said kind of tough. No, man, you're not kind of tough. You are fucking tough, right? Well, what other dynamic is going to show toughness like what you went through? So calling you out on that, take out that qualifying word, and letting you know that you are tough, man. So you went through, got your MOS, so infantry. Now you're in officer school. I think that's what you're about to get into, but I wanted to make sure you did walk us through that process, especially since you called it out as being a really difficult moment.
Yeah, I mean, so the one of the biggest things, it's interesting what attrited or what eliminated people through different phases of military training, right? Because I actually think this is an important conversation tying to veterans' resilience, adaptability later on in life, right? Was in officer candidate school, which is the boot camp for officers. I think our attrition rate, and I went through in the winter time, which was I think a little bit higher because it was just miserable. Right. I think it was like 49 or 51% that were eliminated.
Yeah, wow.
But what I really learned there is that they were going to break everybody physically. Like that was that. Like there was no you can be the strongest person in the world, and you are still going to be pushed beyond whatever physical limits. It really then became, how did you handle that mentally? And I think for the people that that really broke that weren't able to just realize I'm past this threshold, like I'm broken physically. How do I respond emotionally? And or how do I respond behaviorally? And actually, not to weave in like psychology, I think like some level of there's a cognitive behavioral therapy, right? So identifying like what emotions, but separating maybe, the emotions that you're feeling or you're enduring from like the behavioral actions of, and for example, like I know I'm broken, I feel broken, but I'm not going to quit. Or like this is going to be a conscious decision where I'm separating the emotions that I'm feeling from, failure as a behavior.
Absolutely. It's all about that mental capability, right? I always found it was funny. I don't know if you ever came across this experience where, just younger generation kids, whatever, who are interested potentially in going into service, that asked me, what can I do to train for it? And I'd always say, you want to know what you can do to train? Do 100 burpees, time yourself. Second time around that you're going to start, literally right after you finish 100 burpees, do it in half that time. Then do it in half that time. It's really easy to break yourself physically. The question is always, how do you get through it mentally? How do you continue going? So good call out. Yeah.
Yes. So that, that really, and that did a great job of setting the tone for what the rest of training was going to be like for the Marine Corps. Our 6 months of Marine Corps officer training was very much geared toward more of the crawl, walk, run kind of, terminology, but, some classroom training, some fields application, and some like discussion groups and war gaming. And then you actually kind of practice different scenarios out in the field or in the woods. I mean, infantry officer course was particularly challenging because they really knew how to break you in different ways that were like non-traditional. Like, it was a lot of sleep deprivation, but a lot of it was a lot of mind games, to the point where like you had to learn how to function. I'm not saying function at like an incredibly high level, but like you had to learn how to make some type of critical decisions or analyze factors when you were really depleted, and that could have been sleep, that could have been physically, and they did ramp the stakes up like pretty high, like live fire, after long marches, different shoots, like tank integrated with infantry, live fire, like simulate, like a lot of really there was a lot of really creative a lot of creative exercises that they did that taught different lessons. And I don't know that, more strategic design of like what everything was trying to come out. But, and then there was kind of this theme of like fighting throughout. So like you kind of would be in the middle of class, and then they would have like, people ground fight in the middle of like class. So it was kind of like this mindset of like always being prepared to be aggressive, which was really fun. And when you're in that like more it was a fun environment, right? And so I'll jump into kind of, if you don't mind, I'll kind of pivot in. So I got stationed with 2nd Battalion, 5th
Sure.
Marines on the West Coast. An awesome spot in Southern California. I lived in Orange County, with like 8 guys on the beach. It was fantastic. And then I deployed 3 times in 3 years with, the first 2 were with 2-5, and the last one was, by myself. The first deployment was to Southeast Asia. It was part of what's called a MU, a Marine Expeditionary Unit. And you float around kind of on Navy ships, for 6 months, and you stop in different ports or different countries, and you a lot of times do a cross-training event, with like, the local, military. So we did an operation called Cobra Gold with the Thai Army, the Thai Marines, the U.S. Army. It was a huge combined arms exercise. We did a stopover in Malaysia. And the design of MUs, for the United States military and amphibious operation is, MUs are Navy patrols kind of in different bodies of water around the world, and they can serve one of 2 purposes. They either respond to natural disasters or they respond to some type of conflict. And, Marines are often called like the tip of the spear, and like the Marines go in first, secure, and then like the Army comes in and hold steady state. I'm not shitting on the Army, well, like fully right now, just like a little bit. But the Marines are oftentimes like an expeditionary force. And so actually we had just gotten off port in Malaysia. And when Marines get on to land, when they've been on a Navy ship for a while, all hell usually breaks loose. But as soon as we got on to land, there was basically the emergency recall because the East Coast, the Tohoku tsunami had just ripped through the East Coast of Japan. Wow. I don't know if you remember that. It hit Sendai, Japan. This was 2011. Anyway, it was very disastrous. So they recalled all of us. So, we carried each other out from the bar. It's amazing how much damage Marines can do in like 4 hours at a bar. But it took about 24 hours for us to like carry everybody back onto the boat, get full accountability. We went underway to the East Coast of Japan, and we ended up sending a small unit to help out. So really, like, we got to serve the purpose of our mission to respond to natural disaster. As devastating as it was, we were able to be of service in that theater at that time, which was fun. Fun in a context of we got activated to go help, but really fucking devastating, like holistically for the nation of Japan. So
like, so you said, you served your purpose.
Yeah. So I mean, we did what we were there to do, and I hope that some there was some mission that was I know it was helpful. So we got back. So at that point, I was a platoon commander, in charge of a platoon on one of the boats. I came back, and we then started to work up for an Afghanistan rotation. So at that point, I was put in charge of a small advisor team, because at that point we were beginning the drawdown in Afghanistan, and so the Marine units that were in rotation were trying to move away from like more direct action combat, like get there, go out, kill bad guys, into more of a partnering capacity with the local Afghan National Police, Afghan Army. And so really, it was the turnover of setting up the local population for more of a sustained presence. You and I both know, hindsight, that that wasn't very well achieved when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan. I'm not here to talk policy or our military tactics at all. But 2012, we went over to Afghanistan, a place called the Helmand Province. And I was in charge of it was 88 Afghan National Army soldiers, as well as my small team of kind of more senior infantry, Marines, as well as a Navy corpsman assigned to me. So off the bat, it was a cultural immersion, if you can understand. Sure. I had to learn some Dari and some Pashtun, which are Pashtun's like a southern dialect to more of a rural Afghanistan, and Dari and Farsi, I think, are similar dialects to a lot of northern Afghanistan. And so,
not easy languages.
No, and to be honest, man, as much as I hated finance, I've always loved languages. I've loved
there you go.
learning languages.
That's great.
And kind of studying human behavior, and always been very intrigued by that. So really, it was a test of building multicultural interpersonal relationships. And then when you add like getting shot at on top of that, like understanding how you have planned for like, or need to conduct CASEVACs, or need to kind of communicate about what the next steps are, you really influx a lot of chaos into something that's already kind of challenging in a communication. And again, I actually think that this mindset ties in down the line. But
good call out.
You know, it was very autonomous. We lived on a very remote patrol base. You know, I'm telling you, man, like I ate only rice. I ate only what they ate, which was a flattened bread, rice. We got like one goat and one chicken throughout 7 months. So like,
that's wild.
It was, you know, people talk about like, you know, going native, and like when you're in that like type of like, you know, there's some pretty interesting stories, at least in U.S. military, of like Vietnam, and they really integrated in the local population and learned about, you know, cultural sensitivities, language, norms, behaviors. So anyway, I love that shit. I fucking loved it. It was, to me, it was, you know, it wasn't going native to the point of forgetting like who I was and what we represented and what we needed to do, but it was to the point where our lives really depended on it. Because and just so you know, like I mean, a Taliban tactic that was going on at the time was the Taliban was holding hostage members of the Afghan National Army's family, because all the ANA, Afghan National Army, they were all from northern Afghanistan, and they were deployed down to southern Afghanistan, where a lot of the conflict was. And so the Taliban was finding who their families were, and basically kidnapping them, and then calling them down and saying, you need to kill your American counterparts or we're going to behead your family. So it was a really crazy time to be in a partnered force, and you know, from a very fucked up, you know, military tactic. Like the Taliban was incredibly creative in like how they modified IEDs to like U.S. military would invest millions of dollars into these like gadgets that could, you know, scan mines, and then they would change one part that cost them probably 3 cents, and it would nullify the, you know, the effectiveness of this new adaptation. So it was really, you know, you talk guerrilla tactics and like like warfare. It was a really interesting, challenging fight to be a part of. And so that was going on in northern Afghanistan. So there was a pervasive fear that like one of our own guys was going to turn on us, and it happened a lot to U.S. military partnered forces, especially during that window. It was
especially given the stakes that you called out, right? I would, you know, tell me if you think otherwise. However, I would separate, you know, terrorism, which is holding unrelated, you know, family hostage, versus you know, improvising on IEDs, that being military, right? So terrorism versus military. And I would suggest that their terrorism tactics definitely played into, you know, potential of flipping of those Afghan forces.
Yeah. And it was kind of hard, because you could only be so prepared for that. And so to me, the way I did that was really like investing in social capital is what it was. Like I really spent the time. We watched American movies together almost every night. We would play volleyball in the compounds, the mud compound that we lived in. They somehow had a volleyball net. And so like that was an evening activity that we do. How volleyball became like this local urban or rural sport of Afghanistan, I have no idea, but somehow it made it to the poppy fields of the Helmand province.
That's funny.
So to me, it was all about relationships, man. Some of my guys were better at really getting outside of their like cultural comfort zones and establishing rapport than others were. And so it made for an interesting dynamic as a forward force. But nonetheless, got through that deployment, got back home. I was about to get out of the Marine Corps, and then my executive officer was like, "Hey, Jesse, like, you don't really have anything concrete lined up at the end. How would you feel about going to Australia for 7 months by yourself to be an operations officer?" And I was like, you know what? Let's give it a go, man.
That's a pretty good hook.
Dude, he was the man. He, to this day, he wrote one of my grad school recommendation letters. He's
awesome.
He's somebody I really look up to. But anyway, I took his advice. Awesome. I didn't have anything better to do. I went over to Australia, had a great time. I went right on the back end of Afghanistan, which was a huge contrast, right, of experiences from being in a combat zone with, no liberty, kind of constantly in like a semi-dangerous situation, to then being in a place that like, you could go to the bar all the time. There were lots of, women around. There was like, there was just a very different vibe, but nonetheless, great experience. I loved Australians, and I'll put this on the air for anybody to hear. Australians were just the wildest and the most hospitable sort of culture to walk into, at least being an American. And I really loved it. I really felt a part of the community when I was over there, really welcomed. I was pretty wild myself at that stage in life. So I really built some great relationships. Some of those guys I met have come over and visited me in the States. Awesome. And I still keep in touch with a number of my Australian buddies. So, all right.
Before even wrapping that up, I wanted to bring to light, you mentioned the contrast between, Afghanistan and right to Australia. I'm curious what, that same kind of thought process perspective is from your prior deployment to Afghanistan, right? That Asia deployment, Afghanistan, then Australia. But what was that kind of, shift difference?
So as an infantry officer in a wartime military, everything is preparing you to go to combat. Everything that you want to do, and for better or worse, the pinnacle of your value and we can dissect this super deeply, but becoming an infantry officer during wartime is the highest chance you're going to get to go to war and fight and feel what it's like to get shot at and shoot at people and deal with the casualties and hopefully neutralize bad guys. And like that experience is a lot of times at the foundation of Marine Corps training, definitely infantry training. And so in my mind, like the MEU, as much of a purpose as it served, if you're looking at the strategic, the operational, and the tactical level, we were at the tactical level. We might have been doing some operational shit, but my world was at the tactical level. And to me, that was just a warm up to get to Afghanistan that we knew was on the horizon. So, it was a good experience and a great cultural experience. Being in Southeast Asia, I had one of the coolest fish. I'm a huge fisherman. I had one of the coolest fishing trips. Again, it involved somebody that spoke zero English. It was all hand and arm signals in the way that we communicated. But it was really, really interesting in that story. And like the beauty of the military for a lot of us veterans is it sends you to these places either to be stationed or on a deployment that you would never go otherwise. And you would never experience or you never see. And whether you're doing some crazy shit or whether you're just kind of sitting and doing paperwork, like a lot of a lot of people, I think, do overlook that experience, that rich sort of cultural diversity
Sure.
that like is kind of infused into military service that you don't
Mm-hmm.
maybe value until a little bit later in life when you look back.
Great call out.
And
I agree.
I have pictures of these two big fish that I caught, and people were like, "Where'd you catch that fish?" And I was like, "Oh, off the coast of Okinawa, Japan." And they're like, "Where'd you catch that fish?" I was like, "Off the north coast of Australia, like in Darwin." They're like, "Shit, like you've been to like those places?" I was like, "Yeah, like the Marine Corps sent me there."
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think so, like there's, and I often hear from people who like it's hard, I know, on families, but people who go to like get stationed in Germany or in Poland or other places really look back on those posts or those billets, as challenging as they might be in the moment, and they really kind of add a lot of value. So I
Yeah.
guess I got off track there, but
No worries.
mindset from more of a peacetime MEU deployment where it was
Mm-hmm.
really difficult living on ship for that long. That's not a fun life.
Sure.
God bless all the sailors that do that. Navy people are amazing. But Afghanistan was what everybody wanted to do. So that was
Right.
like, I think a lot of, this is kind of a fucked up way of saying it, but like a lot of people like got their cherry popped in like a war zone, and they, experienced what it was like. You know, to dive into that, if you want to go into something, I think, I remember, I think it was 10 or 12 days. We got in our first firefight, our first gunfight,
Mm-hmm.
on patrol, I think 10 or 12 days after being in country. And I remember you never know what that experience is going to be like because you've been training for it your entire military workup. And then it happens. It's a huge wave of like emotion. There's like, I can only speak for myself, right? Everybody has their own
Yeah, of
experience.
course.
But I remember the one thing I distinctly remember after, we got out, it was 3 or 4 hours. We were able to like, navigate our way out of that ambush and get back to our patrol base. And like, there were no casualties. And I remember a difference. I remember sitting down and being like that was kind of awesome, but I'm like really fucking exhausted. And then I remember some of my guys being really angry. And I
Mm.
remember not knowing how to sympathize with how they were feeling. And it was I've always thought about this, man, is some people when they're shot at and I've some people, or when they're in danger or their buddies are in danger, and I hear it, I feel it, I can empathize,
Mm-hmm.
but it turned their emotions into I really want to kill them because they're trying to kill me or the bad guys. And for better or worse, how I always kind of looked at it was like they're just doing their job and we're doing our job. There's
Right.
actually less bad blood than like, and maybe I don't mean to like, it's just been my experience. Like
Yeah.
I never had this like really deep seated anger in combat that I saw a lot of guys have, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe that my small team didn't sustain any casualties. Perhaps if they had, that might have channeled a different emotion, but throughout the entire deployment, with different engagements and different experiences, and we did have we had several guys killed and a number of guys lose legs or get
Mm-hmm.
shot, but it never turned to a mindset of like hate and it was just more, this is what we do, this is what they do, this is what
Right.
we do. We're just kind of in this fight together, and we're trying to outlast you. So
That's a
yeah.
great mentality to have, especially as an officer, right? I mean, you got to be able to be level headed enough to lead your team, right? So for someone who's not an officer, right, you can go in a whole different slew of ways of managing that mentally. But for you as an officer, you got to be able to lead that team, right? You can't just be thinking only about yourself or only about the person right next to you. So that's a really interesting take, and I would very much agree. Whoever's able to accomplish that, mental state in that situation, right? That's allows you to move forward in a best case scenario, right? Best decision making ability scenario because you're just neutral to the circumstances.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, there have been two emotions or lack thereof that I've been ashamed of in my life in those moments. Now looking back, not ashamed, but I remember as a kid, I was always so emotional that when I would get really upset, I would just start crying. I would just start, and I remember being like, I'm really ashamed of this, like how much emotion builds up and it comes out even when I'm angry in tears. I distinctly remember that. And now I'm really thankful that I'm that emotional. But I remember feeling very ashamed of, I'm not angrier. I'm not angrier at the guys that are shooting at us, and I'm ashamed that I'm not. And that's been something that, like, it's funny, I haven't really even talked to that many, like, anybody I think about it. I haven't really, not that it's something I've really needed to unpack. But it was a recognition where I'm like, I wish I could be as fucking angry as these guys are, because they're trying to end our lives. And I see how angry that's making some of my guys. And I was just never, I was never able to feel that. And it's not wrong. It just was how I was reacting, I guess, or I was feeling in the moment.
I mean, man, I'll double down on what I said. And, you know, if you were my commanding officer, then I'm telling you now, just from a, you know, perspective unrelated, that I appreciate that emotion, that mental state, right? That emotion set, knowing that you're out there leading teams. So for whatever that's worth, if I were to create a range of right and wrong, being angry, being wrong, why? Just because of what that does to your mental state and ability to make decisions. Most right is, in my opinion, exactly what you just said in terms of having that neutrality, right? To be able to manage what's happening in front of you. So take that for whatever it's worth. That's my piece on it. And I, you know, congratulate you for having that ability.
I you know, I think it was what it was, but I
Sure.
appreciate you reinforcing that.
Yeah.
So I guess, and like, I know I'm bumping my gums and running long here, but, like, you know, if you're all right with it, we'd love to kind of get into the transition
Absolutely. So
phase.
yeah,
You
let's
know,
please do
so
it. So you finish up in Australia. You get back to where and what's next?
get back to Orange County.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I have already submitted my separation papers. They've been
Mm-hmm.
approved. I, like, land on home soil, and I'm out like two weeks later. So mind you, I'm in Orange County, Southern California, beautiful. I'm living on the beach. I have 3 deployments in 3 years, so I have some money
Mm-hmm.
saved in the bank, and I have no ambition of what I'm going to do next.
Mm-hmm.
So, although I talk to a lot of people about transition, and
Yeah.
I think from a very educated lens,
Mm-hmm.
my story is very unlike other people's, in that I
Mm-hmm.
basically just went on a partying and you know, drinking, kind of bending tear in Southern California. And I don't recommend that for anybody, but
Right.
you have to
Right.
understand, man, like, every part of who we are and our own journey and our own life is what, you know, is what shape where we get to in life and all those experiences. So, like, on one hand, I can be like, dude, all my buddies went to, like, you know, business school and did a bunch of, like, you know, transitioned into, you know, their corporate jobs right after the Marines.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I went on a tear. I was
Yeah.
no longer, you know, withheld by the rules of the military, and I had some money saved up, and I was single, and I was just going to go wild. And
Mm-hmm.
so I really ran that for a while until I got, you know, kind of reprimanded and little trouble with the law. You know, woke up in a hospital bed and you know, almost died at like a 0.498 blood alcohol level, which is pretty high.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, it it you know, that was should have been the catalyst to a wake up
Right.
about my substance use and about sort of my extreme behaviors. And this is really important and in substance abuse, because I think it's relatable and it ties to where I'm at now in
Mm-hmm.
life. And I've been sober for almost 5 years now.
Oh, amazing, man. Congrats.
Yeah, thank you. But I think an important thing that I want to highlight here, man, is the military. My identity was very much tied up in this wild and crazy, work hard, play hard, run and gun, you might fucking die tomorrow mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And along with that came a culture of pretty heavy drinking. And I loved it, you know, and I fit right in, and I was just as wild and crazy as almost anybody else. But when you get out of that setting, there are different consequences, and you no longer have this sort of justification, this cape of like, well, I'm going to war next year, so like, who cares if I, you know, get blackout drunk tonight, or who cares if I, you know, do something wild and crazy, like. So I had this sort of like punch right in the gut. It was like, yo, you kind of almost died. You like woke up in handcuffs in the hospital bed. Now, like, you know, you got to kind of like face some real facts about life. So I at that point I was like, yo, I got to move back to Philly, right? I didn't stop drinking, but I did. That was like a huge wake up call to like my substance abuse. It was like, yo, like there are people that like love me and care for me, and like, you know, there's more that I need to do in this life. Truthfully, I had never thought I was going to live to 30. I not that I had like a death wish, but like I was just I was living for the next deployment. I was living for like whatever the next opportunity was.
Sure.
And this plays into how I was very unstructured about my transition. But you know, now looking back, if somebody had given me, and I don't blame anybody else other than myself, but I could have done a little introspection, and hindsight's always 20/20, but could have looked back and quickly realized the type of organizational environment in which I operate most effectively in, or where I have found success as like even a kid. And I really feel like people can, you know, people can look back at their lives pre-military even. And I want to challenge you on this because it's kind of a crazy mindset, but I think you can look back earlier in your life and identify where you were most connected or had the most fun, or where you found the most success, right? Where your strengths were really leveraged or utilized. And I think those contexts can be found in organizational settings. If it was like, you know, I was really good in choir, or I was part of the musical, I was part of the sports team, I was an individual contributor in robotics, like, there are ways to identify the ways in which you learn and you process that are present in lots of different industries and organizational settings. So I think people actually have more power to understand their past in a through a perspective that's going to set them up for success in the future. And I'll connect that, but real quick, and I don't want to fly over my professional experience because it's been, you know, more than 10 years since I've been out. But I was a commercial real estate broker for the first year and a half post-military. So I got back to Philly. I didn't know what I wanted to do, you know, tapped into some networks. I got an opportunity as a commercial real estate broker.
Jesse, before we even continue with that, sorry to have interrupted. Just for some context, what we're hashing out now is the transition phase from military to civilian, and then more particularly before we go into, you know, what you started in terms of career when you got back to Philly. What was kind of like that general time frame between, discharge in California and then moving to Philly, just like a general range?
So I think, you know, it was about 2 months of staying out in California alone and unafraid and no plan. And then it was probably another 2 to 3 months before I got a job.
Okay.
Moved home, kind of got a little control over temporarily over substance use. Really actually started. I studied. I passed my PA real estate exam. I became interested in commercial real estate. The truth was I had no idea. I just started moving in a direction because I thought it was right, and I had done no thinking about especially the type of community that I needed to find. So, you know, when I tell you about, you know, transition, you know, I have learned so much through, and I'm not even going to use the term failure of my own, because I had my own path. It was crazy, and I don't recommend it for anybody. But I learned a whole lot through that process, and now through working with a lot of people in their own transition that I think have done a fantastic, you know, job, or at least a more
Awesome.
deliberate job. And keep in mind, man, everybody's transition is unique to them because their situations are different. If I had a
Absolutely.
family and a kid, I would have been far more calculated financially, like, you know, professionally. Like it would have been a different approach than where I was at in life. And so no single piece of advice is going to no
Correct.
single external piece of advice is going to be good for everybody. However, mindsets can be universal.
Totally.
Mindsets and introspection and the things that you explore about yourself can apply to anybody regardless of their external or environmental situation.
Very, very well said. And I want to double down on that concept where, you know, no two people's experience is going to be the same. Rather, the intention here is to hear what others went through, find or maybe just allow relatability to happen, right, in some context or form, and then see how you can apply, you know, that relatable context to you. See how you can take that advice and apply it to you, make it unique to your own, because of course your experience is going to be unique to yourself, and it can't be compared to anyone else's. Jesse, you pointed out already some really powerful tips and concepts that, you know, I haven't thought of either. I haven't heard of either, which was to say, you know, in that beginning, especially in that beginning phase of transition, you know, think about yourself as a kid, and what, you know, was interesting to you. What did you excel at? And try and apply that, you know, as you transition out of military, because, you know, that certainly can be applied to anyone and everyone, because it's particularly unique to your experience, right? So that's an awesome tip in that transition period. Thank you, man.
Yeah, and the two other pieces that I think are really universal and important to think about for everybody during transition. A lot of times people get out of the military and they've been getting pats on the back or awards in whatever rank or whatever thing, and they've been saying you're a great Marine or you're a good soldier. And then they get out, and a lot of times people are like, well, what am I good at? That's like a very big mindset shift to like, this is a huge world out here. I was
Yeah.
really good. And the military, for as much as you want to shit on it, has a great recognition system. And there's a real safety net put in place in the military to mitigate you know, dropping out or falling out or whatever. And that's, you know, that's because it is, you know, first of all, it's very expensive, I'm sure, to train somebody
Right.
and then lose them. But the truth is, like, you're always getting fitness reports. So you're getting constant feedback on what you can be doing better. You're getting awards like here and there for things that you do. And like a lot of times, like, you're getting pats on the back, like, you're a pretty good Marine. Good job today, this week, this deployment. And then you get out and a lot of people are kind of look in the mirror and they're like, what am I good at? So I think the two mindset, and one ties into the next, man, is an exercise I'll often like recommend to people is, you know, sometimes veterans, like, one, they may not know what it is they're good at, or they may not be
Right.
able to connect what they're good at with how it could be value add in a civilian context. And so I always encourage people to like ask friends or partners or parents or siblings, like, hey, it sounds silly, but like, what are some things that you think I'm good at? And like,
Great tip.
if you're unable to diagnose yourself, and, you know, some people are able to look in the mirror and be like, I'm pretty good at this, or like, I know that this will be an area that I'm good at. If you find yourself unable to do that, you know, kind of when you get out and look in the mirror, you can ask those around you, and their input, the people that know you very closely, can probably give you either technical or non-technical skills or strengths that you should kind of begin to let marinate a little bit, and may provide some type of future. And this is probably the most important, and what I just talked about, the understanding that when everybody gets out of the military, if they did 4 years or 25, there is a reality that when you go into a new industry or a new organizational environment, you will lack confidence in some capacity. Whenever you're going through something new, if you don't, then you're probably a narcissist, and that's all right. But like, if everybody that's going to be going through into a new situation, I'm sure you've heard the kind of quote. It's like, people don't fear change itself; they fear the loss that's created by change. And when veterans go into the next thing, they're super excited about like whatever's next. But sometimes they fail to acknowledge what they're leaving behind.
Amazing advice.
And I think one of the most important things people can understand is when you go into any new job, any new school environment, wherever you go when you leave the military, it's going to be new and you're going to lack confidence. One of the biggest things that you can do to build confidence quickly is do something that you're good at, and that you can quickly be recognized that you are contributing value to a team or an organization. And it doesn't always have to come in technical experiences, right? Anybody that goes into a new industry is probably not going to have the technical experience.
Correct.
They're going to have a delta or a deficit. But if they can go into a role where their strengths in some way, shape, or form are being utilized to add value in some way to the organization or the people around them, people build confidence so much quicker. And that is such an important thing for people to have in their minds when they get out of the military and go into something new.
Ultra important. That's amazing advice. You already touched on something I wanted to kind of like add or highlight in that concept, which is to say, even if you're not military, this concept exists, right? If you're shifting industries, if you're shifting to a new company, even in the same industry, in the same role, you're going to have that complex, right? So it's a matter of recognizing, one, everybody has this experience. So you're not alone in that scenario of transitioning between phases. Two, it's also, I guess, recognizing and being a little easy on yourself, right? Understanding it's okay that you're coming from a very extreme environment, shifting into normalcy per se, right? So whereas another individual is shifting between different versions of normalcy, right? Career to career, you're shifting from extreme situation, which is military, to career. So be nice to yourself, recognize it's okay, and practice those tips that you just mentioned, Jesse. Those are awesome tips, advice to go by. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think the one biggest change from military to civilian world when I got in my first job and kind of all throughout is the difference in a sense of urgency was the craziest thing that I experienced, because, if somebody asked me to do something, I would jump on it as if like my house was going to burn down in 10 minutes. And I would run myself ragged to like execute whatever anybody asked of me. On one hand, that can make you pretty reliable, but when that's not reciprocated by everybody else, when you ask people to do things, that was such a void in my expectations from the reality of the civilian world. And now I understand it. I understand it 10 years later, but in my first job, I was like, nobody's actioning, nobody's moving fast enough, nobody's taking enough initiative, everybody's scared, everybody's concerned about this and that, and I just didn't know the context. And the truth is, the priorities are so different in the civilian. Even in 2013, pre-pandemic, like, people just don't give a shit about this. everybody, I shouldn't say it that way. People just have different priorities, and
Correct. Yeah.
not everybody's number one priority is getting done what you ask them to do.
Right.
And unfortunately in the military, it's about executing whatever has to get done, and you set aside all those other priorities. And so sanity checking yourself and realizing that like things take a lot longer in general, there's just a different sense of urgency than what you're used to expecting in the military.
The stakes are very different, right?
Yeah.
You're going from,
That's a great point.
exactly. Yeah. So it's just a matter of kind of leveling out, I'll call it, right? And recognizing that stakes are very different.
Yeah, it really is. And some part of it, maybe you can adjust your mindset, but more realistically, you just have to experience it. But again, a lot of I think what we're talking about, and a lot of like the discussions and the beauty of kind of thought leadership is like, take whatever's valuable that you hear, and if a nugget makes sense, then use it, put it in your pocket, and then hold on to that mindset. And then when you see some things happening around you, you're like, oh yeah, that's a mindset tool that I can enact.
Absolutely.
Or like the hard part is like everybody has their own thoughts and experiences. You don't have to listen to everything because not everything's going to apply to you. But one little mindset shift or way of like, or anticipating the civilian sector sense of urgency is not as serious as the military. Even maybe hearing that can prepare you for when you experience that. You're like, oh, I remember hearing that this was going to be different. Now, at least now I'm seeing it, and it's not such a shock because like I've been warned, you know?
Exactly. All right. So we started career right in Philly. You got back. What's next?
So then I got into commercial construction management. And this was a great kind of career chapter of my life. So that, you know, the two reflections, right? My time in commercial real estate, and I want to make one more sort of last squeeze into transition guidance. There's something called a 2x2 passion skill matrix, but I won't go through it all. But the point, the takeaway is this: try to find something that you're good at and you're passionate about, or you're interested in. So something where there's alignment between your skills and your passions, or your strengths and your interests.
Awesome.
So, and I think, you know, if I had even thought about that or known to like evaluate that, like I wouldn't have been in the sales world in commercial real estate in the first place, right? I was working as a broker, which is by yourself. I've always been a part of teams my entire life. Looking back, I should have seen that. Like my best performances, where I felt the most comfortable, where I thrived in like pressure-filled situations, were coming through for like people on teams around me, or in musicals, or in things where like people relied on me. And it wasn't in individual roles that like where the compensation's purely like commission based. Money doesn't really drive me to like, you know, knock down like every obstacle in my way and like work 90 hours a week. And like failure to recognize what motivated me and like the type of environment that I productively like interact with, really just like, you know, and I'm not shitting on commercial real estate brokerage. Like,
it's for you.
I just thought it was cool. There's a bunch of college athletes that like wore a suit and like went to like parties every night with CEOs. And I thought that was like fun and sexy and shiny. But like, again, I failed to look under the hood of like, this is who I am. This is how I function. This is like what drives me. And I just followed purely like the shiny thing. And it really was not fulfilling to me at all.
It's a great tool that you mentioned. And it's a great example, right? That you're just giving your own example of why that tool is important to use.
Yeah. And so, you know, I think when I got into commercial construction management, and that story is kind of funny, by the way. I went in to pitch the construction. It was a very large construction management, the largest GC in the world. And I went into pitch. I had never heard of them. I didn't know anything about construction. I'm not a civil engineer. I'm just like a, knuckle dragging Marine that like is a little crazy and like, happens to wear a suit on weekdays right now. So, I didn't know anything from anything. So I sit down with this guy that, and I'm pitching him on my real estate services. I know his lease is up in their office building in like a year. And I'm like trying to, shake hands and get in. He flips the script on me. And this is really cool actually, because it ties in a very important 2 huge elements of why we're on this podcast together. Veterans who build. I sat down with this dude and, it was a Friday morning. I'm sure I had, kind of gone out the night before. It was like, here comes another rejection meeting, which it was, but not in the same way you're thinking. But like, I sit down with him and I'm like, hey, like, here are, these are the services we provide. He like cut me off. He knew what I was in there to do. He's like, I don't need you. Like, well, he was like, well, tell me about yourself. Cause this guy, he liked to get to know people. And he's a fantastic human being. So I go, well, like I was a Marine Corps infantry officer. He's like, tell me what an infantry officer does in the Marines. And I was like, well, like, the technical inside Marine Corps is like, we close with and destroy the enemy through like, fire and maneuver. And I forget the exact definition, right? But it's like, it's pretty visceral. It's pretty like, we kill all the bad guys, right?
It's military.
So you don't say that in like a civilian sector. So
right.
I was like, well, listen, like, the Marine Corps functions off this like operational planning, Marine Corps planning process where like you have a defined end state or objective. And you define that prior to mission planning, and then you kind of reverse plan. You identify the milestones. The important milestones are phase lines. And then you really allocate personnel and resources to like hit those milestones or phase lines in order to like accomplish the mission or the objective. And he was like, dude, that's exactly what we do in construction.
You're hired.
I think you should come work for me.
Exactly.
And I was like, dude, I don't know anything about construction. Like, I didn't even know what your company was before I walked from the store this morning. And he was like, I can teach you everything you need to know about the technical side, but what I can't teach are my younger civil engineers a lot of the leadership experiences that you had in the military, which was awesome and such a huge takeaway for this conversation.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And what we're doing with our like DOD to AEC program, which I'll hit on, toward the end, but really there was this moment of, oh shit, like how I functioned in the military actually has a civilian, like a higher functional step by step. So like I can understand a new business from like a pretty macro level.
Exactly.
Which was really comforting, right? And he was a really motivating guy. And I quit my job that week. Like, I think I walked out of his office and like called my boss and was like, yo, I'm out. Like, I'm doing this new thing, right? And again, it's my career really follows people. And, I'm going to jump. I know there's a lot of back and forth connecting. I promise it's all relevant. But I want to interject one additional sort of transition, guidance into this moment here. I have found a lot of times that people are driven in organizational life by one of 3 things. It's either the mission or the purpose of the organization, the technical work or what you're doing day in and day out, or it's the relationships cultivated and grown at work. And they're not mutually exclusive. Ideally, you can find all 3, but I often find, man, that people really gravitate to one of those 3 things. Like auto mechanics got to be turning wrenches. Like the technical work, I work with a lot of engineers. Engineers, a lot of times, got to be doing engineering work. They got to be exercising that left brain, like, approach. But I personally have always been driven. I don't really give a shit what the company does. I don't really give a shit what my day-to-day is going to be like. I really care about the people that I'm working with and the people that I choose to follow, because I have realized that what drives me day in and day out are showing up for the people that I respect, I trust, and I love. And I'm going to fucking work hard to make sure I come through for them in whatever capacity is kind of expected of me. And so that's really important in my own story, looking back on why I've made decisions to do the things I have in life.
Amazing insight. That's awesome.
So, and I'm going to speed this really fast, but the next, 4.5 years I spent in vertical construction management. I was a superintendent on a number of different sites. I did skyscraper core and shell builds, fit out work, a lot of MEP and infrastructure work. I did building envelope work, learned a lot, right? I learned a ton about civil engineering to a degree and about architectural drawings and submittals and RFI. Like, I learned about the industry, but what I always loved most, if you were to ever ask me what I loved most about the construction management industry, or the construction industry, and this is fucking important for veterans getting out, is I loved that it was a blend of like white collar and blue collar work.
Absolutely.
And I loved that. I loved that it connected the owners with millions and millions of dollars, and the architects, the designers, the developers. They were only as successful as all of the trades. The 18-year-old carpenter that was on site, they were only as successful as the people that were installing, that were actually building the project. And the owners and the architects couldn't have their vision realized unless it was built by. So there was this interdependent relationship between all of the white collar, blue collar, and the trades. And personally, and I will say selfishly, because I loved it, I could be in a meeting with a blazer on, looking at some high level scope changes or budget constraints or schedule considerations in the morning. And then I could put a mouthful of Copenhagen in, my hard hat and my muddy boots, and be out in the field with, the trades in the afternoon. And to me, that balance of like putting my mind to work and then also being able to experience, the tangible benefits of watching things get built and constructed around me, and watching the hard work that went in to the, the sites and everything that happens to actually change the landscapes around you was really, there was this beautiful kind of balance.
Absolutely. It's really interesting to continue hearing how, veterans articulate what you just did in their own ways, which is to say, look at all of these kind of translatable elements, I'll call it, of military experience into construction development space. And it's really awesome to just hear everyone's piece about that. Very well said, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. And so that really was what was very rewarding for me. Again, in that chapter with, I then, I have the GI Bill. So I'd wanted to go back to grad school for a long time. But, I had never known exactly what I wanted to study. And I didn't want to burn the GI Bill on an MBA, because there's a part of it, the finance and the like part of the MBA experience really isn't that like exciting to me. And so throughout this time in construction and in my time in the Marine Corps and looking back earlier in my life, I really was able to understand that what I love most about any situation is understanding the human beings that are working together to accomplish whatever it is they're trying to do together. And the recognition through working on construction sites with 400, trades workers, and running foreman meeting with 25 different trade foremen that are all 20 years older than me, that like don't give a shit about the other trades, is like, you have to learn how to motivate and incentivize people individually. You have to learn to communicate messages, like be a conduit of messages between different entities. And you have to learn to channel communication, because certain people respond to certain things differently than other people, and certain people get along with other people, and certain people, if they're in this role, might have incredible productivity, but if they're in this role, like really might not perform that well. And like understanding these considerations as it comes to teams, and all of these apply throughout my life with soccer, with the Marine Corps, with dynamic construction sites, and all of these interpersonal dynamics that are very fluid and being shaped by the environment, and so many unspoken factors. And so I got this opportunity to come back here and go to Penn for grad school and study organizational dynamics, which is really what this dives into, and really provides these diverse lenses through which to view interpersonal communication and structure and operational sort of planning and execution within organizations. And so that was really, really fun. A really great experience. And a very important note, which I can send you, is my graduate school thesis that you have to write as a part of this master's program. Was titled An Organizational Guide to Leveraging Military Veteran Human Capital.
Amazing.
And I looked at what organizations and managers were doing to leverage the non-technical skills of military veterans in the civilian sector, agnostic of industry, their previous rank, their previous branch. And so I went on this. Frankly, I was really frustrated, I think, with a lot of companies being like, we love veterans, we want to hire veterans. And then they hire veterans, and then they're like, all right, now go sit in this corner and do the spreadsheet that I need you to do for the next 10 years. And grossly overlook and potentially underutilize a lot of these non-technical skills that I strongly believe that veterans, and I know to be true, that veterans learn as a part of military training and operation. I'm not talking about you have to do 20 years and be special forces and do all this stuff. Any branch, any rank, you learn military through training and operation, these valuable non-technical skills. And so I interviewed everybody around, hey, what was working? What are companies doing that's really flipping and tapping into these non-technical skills? And I first had to have them report on what these non-technical skills say, what are these non-technical skills that I'm saying that a lot of veterans have, but and so I interviewed 27 people. I got 106 different responses to the non-technical skills. 106. Now I bucketed them into themes, but they were creativity and collaboration, adaptability and resilience, servant leadership, effectiveness under pressure, and then visibility into diverse work teams. And I don't want to, I'm not going to go into all of those because I think they're very self-explanatory. And a lot of them connect, but those were the buckets of the really important non-technical skills, and which also, to connect to the transition guidance, that is a way to sell the transferable value of your military service.
Absolutely agreed. Absolutely.
And so, what I looked at was, so those are the non-technical skills. And then I basically interviewed people on what organizations are doing to leverage those and bring those out in you. And, the four kind of organizational engagement drivers that companies were taking a conscientious approach to were community, communication, challenge, and motivation. And I think understanding the community, organizations recognizing what what veterans have gone through in military service, and realizing the contrast in what it means to be challenged, what it means to find motivation, what it means to be effectively communicated. The military is super standardized with how it communicates. So communication is super different. Challenge means totally different things in the civilian sector. Community is absolutely different. Then you'll never experience any community like you had in the military. So I just wanted to close that chapter with that.
Yeah.
And so that was my thesis in grad school, which is free, and it's been published, which is great. It's on my LinkedIn profile, so anybody can like download it, and if it's of any
Yeah.
value to either transitioning veterans or to organizations, feel free to tap into it. That was one of the ideas. I wanted to write it, and I wanted just people to read the findings, and if anything could be valuable, use that. Take that, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, man, that sounds like an amazing piece. I'm going to link that. I'm going to, link your LinkedIn as well as that document itself in the show notes. It's really interesting how you bring up what is essentially a necessity for a two-way street, right? Meaning organizations need to be able to recognize what they can pull from and leverage, out of military training, and then veterans need to also recognize that same thing in reverse, right? Well, what did they learn, and how is that translatable? And not only did you point out, both on the transition kind of tactics or approaches, strategies, you also pointed out those translatable skills and strategies and recognizing them. So, I mean, this is like a textbook conversation on what to do, how to do it, how to get there. So that's really awesome insight, man. Very appreciated. So where does this leave you in your journey? Did that just bring us to date essentially?
No, it that's a few years back. So finished
Mm-hmm.
that program. I was in management consulting,
Mm-hmm.
for about a year and a half. I worked for a great organization, had a really, really positive experience. But ultimately got this opportunity to come to MCFA.
Mm-hmm.
My boss is the CEO is a veteran here at MCFA,
Awesome.
and again, he really, in conversations with him, he really sold me on his vision of the organization, and what we're doing. And it's not a pitch for MCFA here, but what we do is a very broad scope of kind of
Mm-hmm.
professional services in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. So offering lots of technical to non-technical kind of consulting services that stretch from master planning, strategy, program management, construction management. We've done work. We do work in the transportation infrastructure, military missions, and installations. We do real estate
Amazing.
development and advisory, campus and community planning, like public private sector hybrid. So like it is a very agile, very entrepreneurial organization, and it used to drive me a little bit crazy because I'm like, we're very wide lens. Like, if we specialize in everything, we specialize in nothing. But like, really, what I've learned, and this is why our approach is pretty unique and ties into this veteran sort of mission here, is
Mm-hmm.
our company is a leadership development organization that is seeking to empower our employees to grow into the best versions of themselves as quickly as they can and as quickly as we can support it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is the antithesis of like the military, like linear trajectory of like spend two. And this is my knock on the fucking AEC industry in general. The outdated model of being like, well, spend 3 years in this role, and then you'll be in zone for promotion, and maybe you'll get a pay raise, and then spend 5 more years, and then you'll be a junior VP, and then you'll get a promotion and a raise. So before you know it, you spend 20 years like waiting for that senior VP promotion and raise, and like, great. I mean, and maybe you had a fulfilling career. I'm not knocking it, but like, I don't want to we are not going to hold somebody up from recognizing and realizing potential if they are ready to fucking seize it. If they're ready to go out and we have the structure in place to empower and potentially upskill and unleash them, whether that's from a technical or a leadership standpoint, I'm getting them in a position that is going to challenge them, that is going to motivate them, that is going to give them, the scaffolding they need to get to the level that they want to be at. And I'm going to push them as fast as they're possibly able to. Now, that's within the umbrella of what we do as an organization, but you better believe this is not some like very bureaucratic, very like linear trajectory organization. It's not a tenure-based system. And it is
Right.
much more a people-based work design around like what your skills are and what you're interested in. And let's find out the right home for you or the right project or program, rather than a job-based work design where it's like, Adam, I need you to do this because this is what the job, so you fit into this box, you only do this. And like, don't ask me to do anything different because that's your job, right? That's
Yeah.
not it.
I mean,
Like, yeah.
yeah, totally to each their own. At the same time, what you pointed out, at the same time, I really appreciate the system that you just talked on, right? In terms of where you're at now, allowing people to excel when they're clearly ready to, right? Not stopping them from excelling and pushing your company forward, pushing the project forward, pushing objectives forward. So I really appreciate that kind of recognition of talent and just vigor and desire to do more. So that's a really cool system.
And that's why I believe a lot of times people leave companies is because they feel
Sure.
constrained some way in their ability to grow and develop. And
Agreed.
maybe that's internally with the organization. Maybe it's in the industry. Who knows? But like, if you eliminate that constraint, like, and it's not easy. Like, there's a lot of art and science around it, especially in
Right.
the consulting world, where it's kind of like engagement or contract based work that you have to like put people against. But the truth is, like, if you can constantly be thinking about that and like, how do you let people fly? How do you
Yeah.
give people the wings and let them give them the opportunity to gain? Daniel Pink talks about it in his 2007 motivation, the whatever, it's autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? Like,
Hmm.
that's what people are looking for. I'm not saying that's everybody, but like the point being, don't let systems and outdated ways of operating constrain what human beings are capable of, because I really believe that far too often it's a lack of systems and processes and organizations to cater to what human beings are capable of rather than the inverse.
Yeah. And by the way, very, very clearly hearing your expertise in that matter and ability to about, talk to creating proper systems to allow people to excel. So really cool to just, experience your knowledge and really cool to be able to host your knowledge, right, for other people to hear, veterans in particular, veterans in the built environment in even a more particular sense. That's really awesome, man. So I want to touch on some career wins. Could be one, could be two, whatever comes to mind.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, one of them most recently is, we have stood up a what's called a DoD to AEC. It's a veteran
Mm,
hiring initiative, right? Because
awesome.
we think this industry is full of like a lot of very technical subject matter experts, call them left brain thinkers, if you will, but a lot of people that are very good with the technical work. I think veterans bring a very unique non-technical skill set, right? That
Hmm.
I've spent some time thinking about and reading and talking to people about. And I really believe that the most effective project teams in the AEC industry are a complementary
Yeah.
balance between technical and non-technical skills.
Mm,
And so our ability to stand up what we call the DoD to AEC, or Department of Defense, to architecture, engineering, and construction, is really a veteran recruiting, training, and hiring pipeline. And yes, that is internal. That's not
hmm.
a staffing revenue generating model. That's what we're doing for our company right now,
Hmm.
and that's an investment that we're making. So, we got to prove for our own skill bridge, and we've really been ramping up that cycle. So that's a quick
I think,
win.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's a quick
go
one.
ahead.
I would suggest that is like essentially an inevitable or maybe a longer term, hopefully not even so long term, uh, proof or roadmap to more returns, right? I mean, if you're
Yeah.
being able to produce better output from your teams, then better output for your company. So that's really cool.
Yeah, and so I'd say, and that's one, and frankly, and so I've been, and I guess another career win, right, is my military service provided me this
Yeah.
opportunity to go back to grad school, and I waited until I'm 38 years old. I'm not fully spring chicken going on 40, have little kids. So like, you know, but I'm studying at night, and I'm finally studying.
Hmm.
I'm back in school at Columbia studying human capital management, which is like
Awesome.
understanding how people need, to be grown and developed in order to,
Mm.
achieve some like level. It's how to leverage their knowledge, skills, and abilities in a way that like increases their output, their engagement in this like mutually beneficial way with the organization. And so
Amazing.
I'm getting to study and apply everything that I'm really interested in. And I hope my passion comes out in what I'm
Definitely does,
talking
man.
about, because this is the shit that I think about in the morning, at night. If I'm out to dinner with my wife and we're with another couple or a group and somebody asks me like about how this connects, like she like walks away because she knows I'm gonna get like fired up and go into like a tear, and she's gonna have to peel me out later. Like I love it, man. And
Yeah.
somehow looking at my military service provided me the opportunity to go back to school, and
Mm.
now I can study what it's taken me 10 years post military to like figure out. And if I had known a lot of the things, and part of it's maturity, and part of it's,
Right.
stopping
Right.
drinking, and part of it's a lot of things, but like I'm trying to give the things that took me 10 years to figure out, and the things I've been
Mm.
studying, I'm trying to pay that forward to people
Exactly.
that are getting out now. And everybody will always have their own journey, and that's a fucking
Hmm.
beautiful thing. But sometimes small perspectives that you can hear or listen to can alter the way that you approach, the way that you look at
Thanks.
life, or the perspectives through which you view situations. And if I can give even like a small nugget to somebody that's like going through something that can be valuable, that's that's a beautiful thing. And I'm always learning. I'm always learning new things. And so I love trying to pass forward, the stuff that I'm learning in a way that might be beneficial or helpful for somebody else.
I mean, listen, man, you already accomplished that with me just listening to you. I have a lot of takeaways from things you've said. I have no doubt that I'm not the only person who's going to have takeaways. So that's an amazing thing. And I was already able in the beginning of our conversation to kind of recognize and hear your passion in this space, and you know your expertise in it as well. And that recognition only continued to grow the more that you gave advice, gave your feedback, lessons learned, and just technicality around really everything that you're doing and learning. So really amazing, and major props to you, and congrats to accomplishing all of that, and basically gaining that expertise, right? Learning that expertise in it. I'm excited to read that thesis that you have. I'm sure that's amazing. All right, so we're gonna flip into kind of the closing of the show. Talk about two things. You can choose both. You can choose one. At least one is wellness practice and books that you recommend.
So wellness practice. Ooh, this is, I'm admittedly not great. I mean, I'll
That's
take,
all right.
I'll take two, one of which my wife has instituted. I'm not as good as she is at this, but we try to do a Sunday gratitude where we have a
Mm,
basket of Post-its. We have a little basket over here, and there's
that's
Post-it
awesome.
notes next to it. So Sunday after dinner, we try to write down something we're grateful for. And in that
Perfect, man.
moment, and maybe it's not beautiful, maybe we're in the middle of a hard moment, and put that, toward the end of the year, right around the new year or the holiday, look back at those and the dates
Love
and,
that.
and different notes that you're grateful for. I think it can be pretty powerful because we go through different shit in different phases in life, and the ability to be forced to recognize gratitude in small things, I think can be.
A- Absolutely, absolutely. I'm
Yeah.
gonna I'm gonna go home and tell my wife about that and start that as well. So that's a really nice practice. That's awesome.
And it takes 10 seconds, and
Takes
that's
10
like
seconds. It's the
you
beauty of
you
it.
as all of us are super busy in life. The shorter the better, in my opinion. The
Totally.
highest ROI for the least amount of time. And then
Totally agree.
wellness practice, man, is I've realized that I'll hit this double.
Mm-hmm.
When I decided to quit drinking and got sober, I learned a
Mm-hmm.
lot about myself. And I'm not advocating sobriety for anybody, but it really forced me to get very clear on what was important to me in life, and it didn't give me an avenue through which to run away from things anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so truthfully, that's been a mental and physical wellness tool that has been
Totally.
probably the most powerful thing I could have ever asked for in my own life.
Right.
And then alongside that comes physical fitness. Out of being pissed off in whatever reason, I stopped working out for a number of years. And I didn't realize that we all know, a lot of people know this, but the mental benefits that get reaped.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a really high energy person, as you can tell. Like I'm very excitable, very passionate, and it can even verge. And I did work out this morning, by the way. But it can
Awesome, man.
even verge
Awesome.
overwhelming if I don't have some type of more physical outlet.
Mm.
And it took a while to realize that for me, that like if I need to be in a good place for my partner and my
Yeah.
kids and my coworkers and those that I'm working for at my company, like I gotta do my best to be able to, can't be pouring from an empty cup, and need to
Mm-hmm.
be kind of prepared. So that's physically. So whether or
Well
not
said,
that's a
man.
good answer,
That's it.
that's for me.
Yo, that's it. That's an amazing answer, and it's something that, again, immediate relatability with myself. And again, I'm certainly not the only person here. What you touched on in the sense of you need that kind of outlet for a moment to expel energy, to level yourself, whether that be mental, physical, both. And I certainly take it very seriously because I know how I feel when I don't train. So I totally agree with you, and that makes a lot of sense.
You you
Awesome, man.
you
Well said.
you look like a marathon runner. And
I
I
do.
mean that,
I do.
in a good way. I don't know if you're
Yeah,
a
yeah,
runner.
yeah. So I do run quite a bit. In the past, I'll call it a few years. It was basically my COVID kick was
Yeah.
getting real into yoga. That was
Oh,
something that I avoided kind of my whole life, and I finally got fed up with just military injuries that were not going away, and I've since been able to really mitigate just pains that I otherwise had that were really disruptive, and just being able to open myself up, whether that be flexibility, mobility, calisthenics, all of those three things combined. It's done amazing things. And I think the funniest part about it, which gives me a laugh every single time I practice, probably about five to six times a week, is the humility in it, right? It's so humbling that you can be in this pose. You can't move your arm, your leg, your shoulder a centimeter. It doesn't matter what kind of brute force you want to throw at it. It's not going to go if your body doesn't want it to go. So the combination of that plus recognition of breath work and what breath work does for you and your ability to move and kind of level your mind. That's been my journey as of the past few years.
I love hearing that. And if there's an ask that I could have, I would really love to. I have been really interested in yoga. I have really wanted to learn more, the breath work,
Mm,
the flexibility, like I'm really interested to hear you say that, and I'm in admiration of that. And
mm,
after another time, I would love to connect with you some more on that, because I would really
absolutely, brother.
appreciate your perspective and your experiences with that.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. I'll say one macro thing, and we'll set up a time and hash that out because I'd love to just give you kind of my experience in that way. Is I was someone who need to pull out an extra few pull-ups, extra few push-ups, an extra few reps. I'll do it just from brute force, right? I had no mobility or flexibility. Like touching my toes was a struggle, and for those reasons, I always I tried yoga like once, twice, whatever. Never got into it because it's kind of the exact opposite of those
Yeah.
elements. And again, just like that concept of I got fed up with not being able to move freely and just feel good day to day. just injuries from both military and also training, right? I mean, training causes injuries. And recognizing that there's no linearity to it, it being yoga, meaning if you do 5 push-ups every day for a week, on day 8 you should be able to expect to do 6 push-ups, right? If you run a mile every day for a week, day 7, day 8, whatever, you should be able to expect to run an extra mile. With yoga, it doesn't function in that way because your body doesn't necessarily provide you that ability to move better just because you did the past few days. It's more so this macro long-term approach where over time you'll start to recognize your body open up. And then once your body opens up, you also therefore recognize, and this is the real cool part about it, is it's almost infinite, right? So once you get more space in your hip, now all of a sudden, oh, I feel my hamstring opening up more. I feel my ankle open up more, my shin, etc. And then all of a sudden it's this like infinite effect of just mobility. And the kicker to all of that, which I really started to focus on, which allowed me to really continue in this path, and to kind of create some relatability with you as well, in terms of, you find something you like and you just go all in. So I did it's 2 courses. So I'm a 500-hour trained instructor. So that's one 200-hour course and one 300-hour course put together. And what was really neat to understand and uncover in that regard is to say my focus is increasing the longevity of quality of life, right? So that's what it's about, right? Not doing an extra rep, not doing an extra whatever. It's about in 20, 30 years from now, being able to bend down and not be in pain, right? Being able to move. So that's kind of my driving force in my practice. So I like to say that to people as a motivating element, right? If you're moving away from it, if you're not intrigued by it, well, think about that statement. See how it feels for you. We'll connect on that though further.
Yeah, it's I see my father-in-law versus my father right now. One of them's a lot more mobile than the other, and one of them's able to run around with our grandkid a lot more, or our kid a lot more easily than the other, and it puts things in perspective. And I'm like, this one of these could be me based off of how I take care of or how I choose not to take care of my body over the next 30, 40 years,
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Last piece here is a book recommendation.
Book. All right. 2 real quick. One was the book Mindfulness by Ellen Langer. She's a really interesting. It's one of actually, it's a pretty quick read. Actually, maybe the only book I have ever read in one sitting. And I say that because I'm a little ADHD, if you can't tell, and I don't really sit still for a long time. So, but I read that, and it was like, for some reason, the way certain books are written really connects with you as a reader, and that was one of them. The other one is actually Adam Grant's newest one on unlocking hidden potential, I think, or hidden potential. It was really, really interesting to me, the research, and he talks about a lot of things, but one of this idea of scaffolding, this idea of helping people, give people the support to learn things in the way that most effectively applies to what the outcome they're trying to gain from learning something new. And it was really interesting that he kind of debunked this myth of like, a lot of people are like, I'm a visual learner, I'm an auditory learner, like, and so the myth was basically like, no, you're not a single one of those. You're all of those types of learners based off of what you're trying to learn and the thing that you're trying to gain. And so that was really, it was a very impactful book. Didn't read that one in one setting. But like a lot of little anecdotes, right? When I talk about nuggets that like kind of change the way you think about things day in and day out, he had a lot of those little nuggets that I kind of stored away throughout that book. So those are my recs, I guess.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome. All right, Jesse, this was a very inspirational, very knowledge dense in the best way possible conversation. I have so many takeaways from it. I have no doubt other people will. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your wisdom, your experiences, your advice, your knowledge. I'm going to, like I mentioned, leave a bunch of links in the show notes, one being your LinkedIn, two being your nonprofit, three being your thesis, 4 and 5 being your book recommendations. And I want to have a shout out to our listeners. Thank you for listening, for tuning in. To those who haven't yet subscribed, please subscribe to our channels, YouTube, Apple, and Spotify. Please please leave a review. And that allows us to create more shows just like this. Jesse, thanks so much, brother.
Adam, thank you so much for having me, man. It's great to talk through a lot of the things that that are on my mind day in and day out. And I really appreciate you having the patience to stick with me, let me run with what's on my heart and on my mind, and provide the space and be a wonderful listener, and prompt with engagement. So I'm very grateful to you for providing this context and sitting with me as we went through this. So thanks so much, man.
Absolutely, brother. Thank you. All right, everyone. See y'all soon. Take care.
Take care.
Thank you to our channel sponsors, Jet.Build. If you're looking for ways to better manage your real estate development and construction projects, look no further. Jet is the command center software for end-to-end real estate development and construction management. That's www.jet.build.